Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Nyx Reads. Thanks so much for watching. This is the start of my first ever reading vlog featuring one specific book. And guessing by the thumbnail and title, you already know what I'm gonna read. I'm gonna jump on the booktok train and read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. The first time I saw this book was when I was watching Noelle's book haul. She held it into the camera and talked a bit about the plot, and I thought, wow, that sounds actually really cool. It came in the mail today. There you go. Wow, okay, so this is the book that everybody's lusting over, and apparently this is sold out almost everywhere. Oh, there's a map, okay. That's promising. Good fantasy books usually have maps. A dragon without its rider is a tragedy. A rider without their dragon is dead. Does that remind you of something? I mean, it's the other way around, but isn't that what's happening in Aragon, one of my favorite all-time books? So maybe that's why I was very interested in this one, because it's been a while since I read a good dragon story. 20-year-old Violet Sorengale is gonna become, hopefully, one of the next dragon riders. At least she's 20 and not 15. This feels nice. Something about hardcover new fantasy books, right? Good morning. I'm sipping my coffee and about to log into work, and you might ask, why do you look so delirious and tired? Well, I had about 2.5 hours of sleep, and then I had to get up for Taylor Swift tickets. So Fourth Wing, the book jacket came off. It's ready for some serious reading. Let's talk about my first impressions of this book, because I literally only made it to page 8. I see how this is very, very bingeable. She lays everything out for you. She tells you how the room looks like. She tells you what the people are wearing. She tells you what their hairstyle is. She tells you what their belt looks like, which if you read a lot of high fantasy, you know that sometimes it gets so confusing. You don't even know who's who, the names are confusing, you don't know how they look like, but here, I guess because this is for a younger audience, everything's laid out for you perfectly. So that is why I'm getting the impression of, okay, I understand how people binge this, because it's very easy digestible. I'm in my lunch break, I should be napping because I feel delirious, but I want to read this book. Quick check-in. I'm noticing how there's a huge emphasis on how short our main character Violet is, praying to the book gods that this is not going to turn into an Allie Hazelwood type situation where our main character is super short, and the number one trait that is being pointed out in her, whoever her love interest is going to be, is that they are super tall and super muscular. Listen to this. He steps toward me and I look up ... and up. Good gods, I don't even reach his collarbone. He's massive. I guess that trope is coming true, and I just have to learn to live with it. Hello, it is Friday. I know I was quite critical in the first clips, but I'm enjoying myself. The setup is that Violet arrives at the Basquiat school. She has to go through like the first test in order to even become a cadet and then eventually train to be a dragon rider. The stakes are high because I wouldn't say that murder is encouraged, but there's only very little protection from cadets killing each other. And then on top of that, that 6'4" Xander guy, who I think is gonna become her love interest, he also wants to kill her, and this is not a spoiler, it happens on like page 10. There's some bad blood between his and her family. I think there's a hint at a love triangle there, because she's also meeting up with a good friend of hers, who she's obviously very attracted to as well. So yeah, I'm positively surprised. I'm gonna do my best to read as much as possible of this on the weekend. It was Prime Day this week, and I made a few orders. I didn't go too crazy, it just arrived, so I figured I'm gonna do a little haul. So the first thing I got, and this is the big purchase, is this thing here. It's the brown multi quick 5V immersion blender. I love kitchen stuff, that's where my money goes. Then super boring, I got some memory cards, they were also on sale. And this is kind of cool, I got edible ink markers. Oh, so they're super cute. There's 12 colors. And let me see how they look like. So there's this end, and then there's, okay, I see no difference. Happy Saturday. You just saw us having an amazing brunch, and after brunch I got us tickets for Ali Wong's comedy show. Maybe I'm gonna try watching some episodes of Beef before going to her show, so I'm up to date with her newest work, just in case she references it in her show. I am past the 100-page mark. I am enjoying myself a lot. So we're learning a bit more about the world and about the conflict that is pressing at this time in the book, in the beginning. And what I'm enjoying so much is what we learn about the dragons, dragon riders. That's giving me Aragon feelings. I think that's why I like this so much. The very special thing that dragons can do in this world, once they find a rider that they create a bond with, the rider actually gets magic powers, and some of them are lesser, but then some riders, I think it's not every single rider, they get a signet power, and that is a power that really stands out. Obviously I'm already thinking about our main character Violet, because I assume she's gonna at some point find a dragon because she's the main character. I'm already expecting her to find a bond with some very special dragon, and I think on top of that her magic powers are going to be like out of this world, because you know, she's the main character in a new adult novel, so she's gonna have those kind of chosen one trope. I have to say that I also got a bit emotional during the first chapters when Violet was reading a letter from one of her siblings, and that was something that she really needed at the time, because Violet is struggling, man. She is not the best in combat because she's technically been training her entire life to become a scribe, so like a scholar type, somebody who documents the history of their world, and she was basically forced into training to be a cadet, to be a writer, and she needs to pivot her strategy to get through all of these trainings. Violet is honestly growing on me as a character. I am rooting for her. I do not find her obnoxious at all. I think she's very much aware of her limitations and what she cannot do versus where she can maybe play into her own strengths. As for the romance portion, there's still not a lot happening. There's like a few candidates now that I feel like, okay, there might be a spark in between them. I mean, Violet has a lot on her plate. There's quite a few people that want to kill her because of her family. That one's, I think, harder to sell because yes, her life is threatened at all times, but you also know that, you know, she has to live until the end. She's the main character, and in this type of book, this is not Game of Thrones. I don't think she's gonna be killed off on page 200. And I am right now applying the sunscreen to just take a walk because it's not raining today for a change. Wow, this is really wide. There is a food festival happening as well, so maybe I'm gonna get some clips of that. One last check-in before we leave. I just did my makeup while listening to the last parts of The Last Cuentista by Donna Barbara Higuera. This is a middle grade sci-fi or speculative fiction story about Petra. She travels with her parents and her little brother on a spaceship to another planet before Earth as we know it gets destroyed by a comet. Anyways, I'm gonna get dressed now. See you later. Good evening. I hope you enjoyed enjoyed the clips from the food festival down by the old port. Since coming home, I watched the first 2 episodes of The Summer I Turned Pretty season 2, and I just resumed reading Fourth Wing. So things are getting a bit more intense and heated. There's definitely sparks flying in the midst of fury. Our girl Violet definitely has some love-hate thing going on with one of the characters already. I didn't plan on checking in with you, but I just read something that made me go, If there's one romance storyline that I really do not like, it's when usually a female main character falls for somebody who's obviously toxic, and a small part of me was starting to wonder if Violet is gonna get sucked into some kind of situation like that. And now I'm reading, you are not attracted to toxic men, I remind myself, and yet here I am getting all attracted. I feel like the author just disarmed me in a way. What can I say now? What can I do now? Nothing. I can just stand by and watch it happen. Happy Sunday. It's past 5 p.m. so the day's almost over. This morning we went to an art installation downtown. It's quite a lot of activities this weekend. It's not always like that, don't get me wrong. I love doing nothing and having downtime. The show was called Miroir Miroir. Interact, participate, and play with 5 immersive art installations activated by your imagination. They were all inspired by consciousness, memory. It was a cool experience. I'm gonna show you how it looked like after this talking part. I hope I have nothing in between my teeth because I just finished a pack of this seaweed snack. I'm not going to tell you where exactly I am because I don't want to spoil anything, and it's getting interesting, but not because of spicy parts. Violet and her cadet mates, they're about to have their first real encounter with the dragons, and I'm very, very excited because I'm very curious to see how the dragons are like. Part of why I loved Aragon so much is that he always had Saphira, so his dragon's voice inside his head, and I'm wondering if we're gonna get the same. Honestly, I am so positively surprised. A small part of me was like, is this gonna be a rant vlog where I'm gonna be picking apart this book? It's not that good of a fantasy story, but you know what? I'm loving it. The fantasy world in here remains pretty small. We have 2 countries that are at war with each other, and that's why these cadets are being trained to become writers. This book is being marketed as a spicy, academy-based fantasy, so just judging by that, I was already sure that it's not gonna be a Brandon Sanderson, Terry Pratchett-esque type of book. I don't want to go so far as to say it's your own fault if you pick this up and you're expecting something like that, but I'm telling you right now, just don't go in this expecting a huge fantasy world. Did I mention that it explicitly says in pretty much the beginning of the book that most of the men walking around in this college are topless? You know, that it's that kind of story, so. To quickly show you because it's one of my favorite things to make in the summer, and it's so simple. It's this peach and prosciutto salad from the Mandy's cookbook. There's prosciutto, there's flat peaches and burrata, and you're supposed to put pine nuts in here, but they cost an arm and a leg, so I just put almond slivers because we had them. Yum. It is Monday and I'm taking my lunch break 2 hours earlier than usual because of this. I'm officially hooked to the story because we got our first interactions, I'm about this far, with the dragons, and it was amazing. The dragons are as majestic, smart, and brutal as I hoped they would be, and I want to read more. Violet is really growing on me. I think so far she's been pretty consistent in her personality. In the beginning, there's a lot of self-doubt. There's definitely some growth there because she does start believing in herself. While I wish there was a bit more training for physical combat, because I think that's where she's the weakest in, and she knows it too. She's very fierce when it comes to sticking up for her friends, and at this point also sticking up for herself and what she now wants. Circling back to the dragons, because they're so far my favorite part of the story. I was so sure that an event is gonna happen that the story is going to turn out a certain way. I was a little bit dreading it because I thought that is a bit cliche. I'm so glad that the author decided to pivot. It did not go the way I saw it coming. Oh my god, there's so many new exciting revelations where I'm at right now. I love the dragons. On a side note, friend of Violet's, who I won't name, I had a weird feeling about them from the beginning. They're starting to piss me off. I don't even care about steamy central parts anymore. Don't care, don't need it. I just want to read about the dragons at this point. Hi, it's me again. I wanted to show you guys something cool. I'm currently working, I'm taking a 5-minute break. I have this tool that I use to check sales on Amazon. And I was like, let me check Fourth Wing. Let's see what it gives. Do you see this number here? Sales rank? This book has been ranking in the top 5 or top 10 for ages. This is insane. Do you know how many books there are on Amazon? I'm on Amazon.com in the US right now. And then if you go up here, in the last 30-day sales, the estimated sales are around 24,000 copies in the US alone, and only from Amazon. This is not including any other bookshop, retailer, indie bookstore, etc. Okay, I'm getting very analytic here. If you see the dip here, I can tell you right now, then this is probably because they were out of stock, right? So imagine if you didn't have this dip here. So I'm in my lunch break. I figured I'm gonna take the time and prep a baked oatmeal. This is gonna be so good. It smells amazing and you can really put anything you want in here. We reached a new, not low, but high, where yesterday during dinner, I was sitting down eating with my partner and I basically recited frame for frame what I read that day to him. He's not reading the book, I am, and yet he knows everything that's going on. There's definitely some faults here. There's a lot of things that are not to love, and I understand why some people are so dissatisfied with reading this. I'm over 50% in this book, and there's no further detail on any of the country's history. I'm ready for a bit more conflict at this point that is outside of the walls of the academy. Do you know what this reminds me of as well? Divergent. Around 100 pages left of this book, which is technically only the book jacket, and that's Olaf right there. I went to bed yesterday on a cliffhanger. I read more at lunch, but the excitement has simmered down. The story is losing a bit of steam for me personally, because now we're in a part where it's a bit more centered around the will they, won't they. This is where you'll lose me. This is definitely a me problem. I will give this to the author though. I cannot read about characters where one person is pining after another person, although the other person is clearly showing all the signals and saying they don't want anything to do with you, and still your main character will go after them and it's just being foolish that way. In this book though, she is not getting herself into that position. She is consciously making an effort to hear what the other person is saying, but also to look at their actions and everything that has happened in the past. So she's looking at the full picture. The characters, like, I've been waiting for them to be more fleshed out, and there's some characters that get a bit of a backstory. I truly do like them. There's one character, Liam, his name is, that I've grown attached to. And the last reason why I'm just not as enthusiastic right now is we're near the end and I still don't know what the big conflict is. I wouldn't be able to tell you what the ultimate interests of the politicians in Navarre are. I do not know who here is morally ambiguous. And the real question here is, how did this book go through so many rounds of editing and reviewing and nobody pointed all of these plot holes out to the author? Listen, I'm still super interested in this book. Anyways, I'm gonna go to the gym now, and I'm probably gonna listen to more modern romance by Aziz Ansari while I am doing cardio. I just received the notice that I can check out The Love Hypotheses as an audiobook from Ali Hazelwood, but I'm not gonna. At this moment, I cannot take another couple where a 5-foot female is completely obsessed with a 6-foot+ man. I can only deal with one couple like that at a time. I have 50 pages left, but I think I'm gonna leave them for tomorrow. I think this book has lost me at page 400 because now we're jumping into a territory that happens with pretty much any couple on TV and books that happens towards the end. We're going through that now, and honestly, I couldn't care less. It's like the magic disappeared, and then just now we were introduced to a very new element, and once again this author finds a way to just let this thing come in and out without any further explanation, and it leaves such a gaping hole of knowledge. I'm crossing my fingers that the ending is gonna be worth it. I finished the book last night after all. I couldn't sleep and went back to the living room to finish the last 50 pages, and I cried. I saw it coming. I was still devastated. My emotions and my thoughts have been all over the place. I cannot remember the last time I finished a 500-page book in pretty much a week. It was a good experience. I regret nothing. I regret nothing. I've gathered my thoughts, and here is my final review for Fourth Wing. I'm breaking it up into 4 categories. We have characters, world building, romance, and magical creatures. First of all, for characters, I enjoyed Violet's POV. I think she's a very likable main character because she's smart. Her character made very consistent choices. I never found myself being frustrated with anything really that she did. She's the character that has the biggest character arc. She really gains confidence, strength, and really starts believing in herself in the course of this book. Also, she's very loyal to her friends. The question that was never really answered is her chronic pain and suffering. There's a lot of talk on how brittle her body is and that she's weaker than anybody else. She hurts faster than anybody else and bruises. And there's obviously like physical changes that she went through with her hair, for example, but I never really learned what's behind it. Maybe that is to come in the second book. That's why I really didn't see the point in the huge emphasis of that, because she could have just also have not that chronic illness and just be weaker than everybody else because she was supposed to be a scribe. She'd never really trained to be a writer. That could have also just explained why she is weaker and not as well trained as anybody else. Besides Violet though, everybody else is a bit two-dimensional, especially the friends. I think it is normal that there's a lot of names that come and go because you can't really go into detail for every single cadet there is in the academy that is training to become a writer. But for example, her so-called best friend, don't really know a lot about her. And even Xaden remains a mystery, and not because he has a lot of secrets. He definitely isn't as interesting and dynamic as Violet. For the world building, there's almost none. So we get this huge info dump in the very beginning of the book. It's not elegantly solved, but at least we get some kind of information, and then we get these sporadic info dumps throughout the book. But other than that, there's just huge plot holes and so many question marks about anything that is happening here. Think about it. What do we really know about Basquiat, even the campus? Do we know what other trials the other scribes, healers, and infantries, what are they going through? Where do they stay? Where do they sleep? Can you picture it in your head? People outside of Basquiat are often referred to as civilians, right? How do their families look like? How do their villages look like? What do their societal structures look like? What do they do for a living? Do they all speak one language? How do politics work? The same question goes for anything that is in Poromiel. What is the history of this country? We know like 3 points, like the rebellion, that there's war, that they have trading. But what do you know outside of that? What is the history of this country? What was the history of the rebellion? How did it exactly start? How exactly was it solved? By the end of the book, I do understand the choices of leaving things out on purpose, but because we had so little information to go off on throughout the whole book, the ending really felt like it came out of left field. I had to think of the movie Inception. Have you watched that? Because in the movie, the dreamer gets a very bare structure of how the world, the surrounding looks like, and he fills it unconsciously with everything that is near and dear and that is familiar, so it feels real. And I feel like this is what happened here. We get a very bare structure of the fantasy world here. And because I've watched so many fantasy movies and read fantasy books, so at times I was able to picture the poor civilians in Navarre that were affected by any kind of war, but it was not because it was very well described in this book. It was because I've seen movies like that before and I've read books with something like that before. Next is romance. I thought that the sexual and romantic tension between the characters here was great. I enjoyed it. I think that the pacing of that was pretty good up until then it became a bit more serious. That was a bit too fast for me, but that's also just personal preference. I will say that the romantic relationship in here is predictable from beginning to end. There's nothing really new in the dynamic of this relationship. You've seen and read it all, but that is also just a genre preference, I think, and so this makes it really a me problem. The same goes for the dialogues that at times get a bit too corny and cheesy, and you know, people fall for each other very fast. It is expected of this genre, probably also a factor why people like it so much. I enjoyed the banter. The writing in general, I had no problem with it. I think the dialogues flowed pretty easily, and the only times where the writing did bother me really had more to do with the world building, when she started to info dump and use so many adjectives to describe certain things, or the complete lack of description of certain elements. I thought that the heat throughout the entire book is very limited. If we get very intimate scenes, I thought they were well written. I thought they were female friendly written. But all in all, I didn't find the sexual content in here too heavy to my liking, because I have a very low cringe threshold. Lastly, the magical creatures. This was my absolute favorite part of this entire book. I absolutely love dragons. I love dragon rider stories. I also really like the shared consciousness aspect of this. I like it when people bond with magical creatures and there's like relationships between them as well. You saw firsthand how overly excited I got with every new information that we got about these majestic creatures, sometimes even, I would say, very cute creatures. I thought it was cool how they can impart powers. I love the dragons. Then the other magical creature that is prominent in this book is the griffin. Pretty much the only thing known to griffins is that they have huge beaks and claws, and that they're half eagle and half lion, is it? I flew through Fourth Wing. I was constantly thinking about this book and talking about it to my partner. I was turning into my 15-year-old self who was so obsessed with fantasy. If I had to rate this just purely for my enjoyment, disregarding the last 100 pages that I was not vibing with that much, I would give this a 5 stars. But I just cannot ignore the ginormous plot holes in this book. If the author was planning to put out more than one book, then I think she should have slowed it down with the romance and just give us more world building. I needed so much more information out of this. And because my enjoyment heavily influences my review, my final rating is 4 out of 5 stars. What did you think of this book? Do you feel similar to me? Are you on camp hate it, or I absolutely love it, I would die for these characters? Because there doesn't seem to be an in-between here. I'm definitely more on the love it side. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed this reading vlog. Plus, you might hear me talk about the second book in the future because I just pre-ordered the second book. I honestly can't wait to read that one. November can't come fast enough. Thank you so much. Talk to you next time. Bye.